And Ken, thank you for your comments. As you were sharing your experiences, it brought up so many experiences for me actually that I was just lost to so many good memories. And I think that today what I would like to do and invite all of us to get engage in is a conversation. And I know that that's going to be awkward because we're here in a Zoom world. And of course, for a year and a half, Mary's been very clear about what she wanted to do with this conference. We've been talking about it for a year and a half. And so it's been exciting. And we were all excited. And we were going to do this live. And there's all this experience. And we are where we are. I recently was doing a keynote with a different audience where one of the audience members actually said, we've been through so many phases of COVID, where those first couple of weeks were just mass confusion. And by the end of it, even their dog was tired that they were still home. People are ready to do something different, and I get that. So in this environment, what I'm going to ask us to do, and I'm going to take some risks today in this environment, just because I think that we should have this conversation. A lot of people in this conversation, either we know each other or we've know of each other, or we've heard about things. This is a small circle and it's a great community to work in. And so there's a few things I'm going to do today that with Mary's assistance to help me. But before we ask those particular questions, I want to ask a few other questions to begin. In 2008, I kicked off the Shingo conference in Dallas, Texas, with a question. I asked this question. I said, before it was called the Toyota Production System, what was it actually called? And people back then, we were asking these questions because we were actually talking about what does it mean when we try to model or to study other companies? What are we actually trying to achieve? And I think, Ken, what you mentioned earlier with we can't just know the methods, we have to know the why is so foundational that I'm grateful that this topic is still the topic for today. What was the Toyota Production System before? It was called the Toyota Production System. It was called the Respect for Humanity System, right? And yeah, exactly. Thank you for communicating that, Steve. It was called the Respect for Humanity System, but the Respect for Humanity System went farther than what we even think in English. For those who speak Japanese, like Ken, I lived in Asia for a number of years and others. But what we're talking about here is, I speak Chinese, but I knew that there was a level of depth when they talk about respect for humanity. It wasn't just that I respect someone. It's a level of respect for humanity, for the humanness in us, to deeply esteem, not to worship, but to just have a deep reverence for someone else. And I think that we need to remember why we respect one another when we do these things. So that was 2008. 2008. In 2010, I was at another conference, a Shingo conference, where I asked this question. And I said, do people trust you as a leader? Do people trust you as a leader? And again, I ask this question today, do people trust you as a leader? Are you someone that they would want to follow? Are you someone that they actually feel like that's someone that can guide and lead me in a way that's meaningful? I know many of us have had experiences or opportunities to spend time with Ritsuo Shingo, and I'm grateful to say, is one of my senseis that influenced my life forever. And we had opportunities to walk floors together, whether it's in the United States or whether we were in Japan or elsewhere. And of course, he was the president of Toyota China. But Ritsuo would often go to any place on a floor. And some of you who remember these stories or have been with Ritsuo on a Gemba walk, and if you ever get an opportunity, it's amazing. But I would stay with Ritsuo just to see where he's going. And we, of course, have a massive factory that we needed to go walk and to be able to understand. And Ritsuo would just come up to the first operator on the floor, and he would just stand and observe and observe. And we're talking 10, maybe 15 minutes just watching this one operator. And while we have this huge floor, and of course they have an agenda, they'd like to show us multiple different things, Ritsuo would just politely stand there looking at this person and just watching how they do their work. And soon other workers would just start coming around because they'd be attracted to see, what is this gentleman doing? What is he observing for? And his first question would always be to me. He'd look at me and say, Max-san, what have we done to make this job harder? What have we done as leaders that makes this job harder? And I'll never forget that his first question was, what is our responsibility as a leader to make things better? And as you might even recall, when Edwards Deming came to the United States and was finally accepted as a guru, which he was, Ford Motor Company in 1983 simply brought him in and said, hey, tell us all the things we need to do. He comes in after 3 days of analysis and consulting, and he sits with the executives. They're all ready to take notes. And the first thing he says is 85% of your problems are in this room. And of course, they didn't even know what to think. They're like, what are you talking about? He goes, who builds the systems and who builds the processes in your business? He goes, 85% of the problems are in this room. So in 2010, I asked everyone, do people trust you as a leader? In 2011, I was speaking at another Shingo conference, and my question was this: what are the intangibles worth in your company? What are the intangibles worth in your company? Essentially, what is the culture like to work in your company? What is the culture like? And I'm not saying what you declare it to be, but what is it actually like? And if you remember, this is a big deal, because when we talk about assessments and the Shingo and how people should come out and observe and learn about your business, really what people are trying to get an assessment for, in my opinion, is the way you do things and how you achieve them, which is ultimately the behavior. And ultimately that behavior doesn't lie. It doesn't pretend. It can't be anything that, is stated on paper. If it doesn't show up in reality, we can see that. And those are the gaps we're looking for. And that behavior aligns with principles, universal principles that we know to be true. Universal principles that we know that if we ignore them, we do it at our own peril. And frankly, when we ignore them, there are consequences, whether we agree with the consequence, whether we believe in the principle or not. And we all know this as we go through the workshops and as we talk about what the Shingo model means and how we apply principles. In 2012, I had joined Shingo as the director of education, and we started working with Mike Martin and many, many, many others, asking people, flying them into Salt Lake or talking or flying out to meet with them. And we were walking through the content and saying, what can we do to help all of our businesses and organizations out there in the world be better at applying what they know and what we know out there? How do we help people to learn how to apply? Because we don't want people to think that just because you've been through a workshop, now you're like, everything's one and done. And most of us already know that's true anyway, but we're going to get into something here in a moment around what does that mean? Now, of course, after we were able to get that foundation of those workshops started, we were able to get the 3 insights identified, and we were able to work with so many good people to identify what that looks like and focus the principles and understand what the model means. I rejoined and went back out into industry, not unlike what Ken said when, he said we work in industry. And I'm grateful to be back out again, working with so many organizations around how do we actually apply what we've learned over the years. In 2012, the question I asked was this: are the side effects worse than the benefits when it comes to the systems that you're creating in your organization? I'll say that one more time. Are the side effects worse than the benefits when it comes to the systems that you are creating in your organization? At times, is it fair to say that some of the systems we've built aren't actually complementary or building confidence or helping us to achieve our results in a way that we wish they would? In fact, at times, we have some of our systems that are so complicated that people actually, frankly, don't know how to achieve what you want them to achieve. And more, or perhaps even more, I wouldn't say more importantly, but I would say that when people feel like there's no way to achieve or succeed in the system that's been designed because it's so complicated, is it possible that we're actually making things really, really hard? And that for any given reason right now, any of us could go to our factories, or we could go to our hospitals, we could go into our organizations, and we could find reasons for why people could be in trouble because they're just screwing up all the time. Instead of trying to find what they're doing to succeed and how we're setting them up for success and what are we doing to create those new opportunities. So let me just share a piece of that, why I decided that when we did get back into industry and joined the Institute for Enterprise Excellence with my colleague Jake Raymer, who many of you know, and my other colleague Mike Steckline, who many of you know, we continue to work together and do these things. But this is the interesting thing. I decided that I'm going to apply this at home. And Ken brought this up, that our why should be bigger than the work we do, although it can have huge, huge benefits. But my why starts with how I lead at home. So I bought a farm. We literally live on a farm in Boise, Idaho, and we raise sheep and we have chickens and we harvest honey and we have some rabbits and we collect the eggs. But here's the thing: is my 12-year-old and my 11-year-old, they are the ones who actually are doing and running this farm. So it's not me. It's not me running this farm. It's them. And the key is that I want them knowing how to lead and how to run things and how to do things and how to do them thoughtfully and how to improve things and how to make them better and why we need to make them better and why we're responsible for things other than ourselves. And if I want them to have good outcomes, if I want my kids to know something and be better in terms of behavior, what better way to do that than by building a system that supports them? Now, famously, and in all fairness, James Clear, who wrote Atomic Habits, which I highly recommend for those of you who have not read the book, he wrote this. He said, "You do not rise to the level of your goals. You fall to the level of your systems." So you don't rise to the level of your goals, you fall to the level of your systems. Now, if some of you are starting to get worried, you're thinking, Max, this is the purpose of this conversation is why. So we're going to get into the why right now, because I would humbly add to what James Clear just said. I don't think it's pithy and his quote is awesome, but it's not enough. And I would simply add this: systems designed without a clear why and a constancy of purpose create confusion, frustration, and conflict. Systems designed without a clear why and constancy of purpose will create confusion, frustration, and conflict. And I honestly believe that. This is articulated in many, many different ways, but in Alice in Wonderland, we recall the story when she comes up to the cat and she says, "Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here?" And the cat says, "That depends a good deal on where you want to get to." And she says, "Well, I don't much care where I go." Then the cat just says, "Then it doesn't matter which way you go, so long as I get somewhere," Alice responded with an explanation. He said, "Oh, well, you're sure to do that," said the cat, "if only you walk long enough. If only you walk long enough." As I did in the description of this conference, I quoted Edwards Deming, who I often quote in almost every Shingo keynote I've ever shared. And he said, "Establish constancy of purpose." And then he said, "People ask me how." And his question with humility, which I love, he says, "I don't know. That's up to you. That's up to the company." Frankly, as a sidebar, let me add that I wish more consultants actually would lead with more questions. Because I think that sometimes I think that like doctors take a vow of or an oath to do no harm, I think that consultants should do the same. And I love Edwards Deming because he did that. He said, "That's up to the company. But if you don't do it, whatever your answer is, but if you don't come up with a constancy of purpose, that company will be under a handicap. And that handicap may have severe consequences." I believe that is true. So here today, my question comes back to the why. And that's what I'd like to focus on and get your participation. So if you would, get prepared, because we're going to need your answers to some questions here that Mary's going to pop up for us now. So Mary, could you feed us the first question? And there we go. Perfect. Thank you so much. And first off, let me just say, Mary, thank you for all the preparation in this work. I mean, we've been practicing this and we practice these pieces to make sure they work like this. It's just so awesome. So thank you. Okay, everyone, please answer this question. How would you rate the clarity of purpose, the why, and the constancy of purpose in your organization? So it just cut off in your organization. So do you know why? Do you know your why and it guides everything you do in your business? Do you know your why, but the priorities change and the constancy of purpose is just hard to maintain? We think we know our why, but there are many different opinions about what that why is if you ask people on the floor. Or the fourth one, we are in the discovery process to figure out our why, but it isn't that easy. Or number five, who cares? We're making money. Who has time for that? So go ahead and submit your answers. And everyone feel free right now to get ready to take some screenshots of the results as they come back. So if you want to grab a screenshot, please do so, because that's what this is all about. We're sharing this learning together so that we can actually engage in this conversation. And Mary, where are we at in terms of submissions? Are we getting pretty close to a result? See if we can pop up a result here. Here we go. Okay, so very few are just making money who has time. We know our why, but the priorities change and constancy of purpose is hard to maintain. Man, I really appreciate that. And I'm not surprised. And I think that it is very challenging. Some people are still on the journey, right? So about a quarter of us are still on the journey. We think we know our why, but there's a lot of different opinions. And then there's about a quarter of us who think, hey, we know our why and it guides everything we do in this business. And I say that's fantastic. And of course, there's a few that are making money, and that's okay too. I actually had a company the other day. I was literally my first flight I usually do 150 flights a year, and I did like my 8th flight this year. Finally, it was since March I haven't flown, and I finally did my first flight last week. I was with a client, and the client actually said, "We make so much money, we don't have time to find our purpose." And I thought, wow, when does that come back? When does that come back? So someone is mentioning, Mary, that they didn't see the poll or the results. They just see the presenter's video. I'm not sure if there's a way, if everyone else has been able to see that or not, but we'll continue to explore that. Go ahead, Mary. What was that?
I'm going to look into it and see if I can get that fixed.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And is that a general thing for most people? If there's a comment, Allison, I know mentioned this to everyone here, but if there's other people that are experiencing that, please let us know. And it might be, Allison, that it could have just popped up behind your screen. I found that it does float on the screen, but we'll continue because I have a few other questions if you don't mind. I see the polls tab on the Zoom screen, Okay, so there was a few that aren't able to see it. But if you click on the polls at the bottom of the screen, it may show up for you, someone mentioned. So it looks like we should be able to get some, it's kind of a mixed result, but it looks like most people are able to see it. Some people received the poll via email. So it should be able to float around on your screen. It might just be stuck behind another floating screen somewhere. And Mary will continue to look at that as well. I really appreciate your help. Yeah, so a few people are not able to see it. See if you can click on the polls at the bottom of the screen, if you can see that there. For me, it just pops up, so I'm grateful for that. I'm going to do another poll here for a moment, and hopefully people can see it. If not, then Mary, maybe if you don't mind, maybe you could pop it up on your screen as a share screen. I don't know if that works or what you would suggest, just so that make sure that everyone can see it after, like the pop-up of the results.
Yeah, they can see it in the Whova app as well. It depends on how they're joining, if they're using Zoom or if they're using Whova. So
gotcha. Okay. I know we only have a few minutes left. I really want to get a few more questions in and do some Q&A here, hopefully. But let's ask the second question if we could. And then what we'll do is, Mary, if you could just pop it up in the share. Number 2, when it comes to understanding the Shingo model and the guiding principles, how do you rate your company in knowing, sharing, and living these concepts? How do you rate your company in knowing, sharing, and living these concepts? And first one is, what Shingo? A few lean leaders know the ideas, but it stops there. Or we held a leadership workshop, but the next steps are challenging. Or we're working on ideal behaviors and systems since learning the principles. Or we've really engaged and sustained our results, and this is just how we do things now. And this is just how we do things. So if we could ask that one there. I'm hoping most people are able to get them. I apologize for the few people that are not getting them at the moment. That's why I'm reading them out loud as well. And I'll read the results, and then hopefully you'll get the recording where it'll work. And if it doesn't for whatever reason, hopefully we can grab some screenshots. Does that work, Mary? That we can share with people in terms of results afterwards?
Yes, I'll definitely share it on the Whova app as well.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so let's see if we can get some results here for this one. Okay, so a few people still trying to figure out what Shingo is, but 37%, a few lean leaders know the ideas, but it stops there. And then we've held a leadership workshop, but the next steps are challenging, about 5%. And then a big majority of people, we're working on ideal behaviors and systems since learning the principles. So about 42%. So about half of us on this call have experienced or know that we're working on leadership behaviors or ideal behaviors and systems and building those systems to be able to create results. I would encourage you in this journey, particularly when it gets frustrating. And for those of you who said, a few lean leaders know the ideas, but it stops there. I would encourage all of us in this journey to think about, how do we get more people on the page with us? One of the biggest problems we have to knowing our why and constancy of purpose, particularly when it comes to constancy of purpose, because a lot of people will declare a good why, but is the power, the pride, and the politics, right? The power, the pride, and the politics often get in the way. And even when we're working on ideal behaviors and systems, power, pride, and politics often get in the way. And one of the biggest systems that get in the way is a system called pensions and benefits for the people that are still making decisions when the people below them don't have those pensions or those systems anymore for retention. So the people making the decisions aren't empathetic or even they're not even thinking about what the younger generation or even others who don't have those pensions and those security blankets of retirement packages would look like. So it's very hard for them. So these systems that they're making decisions on sometimes don't have the empathy that might be required in terms of designing the right system. Here's the other challenge. And some of my clients are actually in this conference today sharing their examples, and I'm really excited about that, and you're going to hear about them throughout this conference as well. But here's the exciting thing. A system that has a clear purpose actually will be better designed. The challenge and temptation of designing the system without a purpose and without principles, without ideal behavior, is that you still design a system that does not change anything. It just tweaks the KPIs just a little bit. But the question is, do you have KPIs identified, your key behaviors that identify to help you achieve the actual KPIs that you've all worked to get? It's just a huge opportunity. We could talk about just this one question for the next 20, 30 minutes, but let's do the next question if you would for us, Mary. So question number 3. Let's do this. Okay, so Gavin's mentioning that if you click on the messages and the link to all the polls is at the top of the next menu in the Wahova app, right? So click on messages and a link to all the polls is at the top of the menu, at the next menu. So this third question, many leaders talk about the importance of change, innovation, and continuous improvement, but it's easier said than done. What best describes you and your organization? Are you excited? Are you on the path for sustainable results in the future? Are you just optimistic that you know some things that we need to do, but we aren't there yet? Or you're neutral. We have good intent, but we're frustrated on how to proceed. Or you're concerned. Many are talking a good game at the work, but no one's doing much. Or are you just surviving? Leaders are taking care of themselves and layoffs feel inevitable. Where does this come in for you? Okay, so for those of you who's not popping up for, I do apologize for that. We thought it would work all in there. Pop-up is only within Zoom. So if you're in Zoom, you can see it. In the Wahova app, I think you have to go and look for it. I don't know that it's popping up. So we'll just have to share the results with you afterwards. And I apologize for that inability to be able to share that. Can you share those results with us, Mary? Thank you. All right, so a lot of people here, over 50%, 51% to be exact, are saying that they're optimistic. So for those of you who cannot see these polls, I'm reading them out loud, at least to cover it for just a couple minutes here. But so there's about 20% of us, about a quarter of us are excited about the path you're on and looking towards sustainable results. Another 51% are optimistic. You know the things you need to do, but you're just not there yet. You're on this path to continuous improvement. May I add that I was walking through a Toyota factory with Ritsuo Shingo when he waved me over one day and he was, Maxon, this is not the Toyota way. We have forgotten the way. We can always be better. So I'm actually very happy to hear that many of us say that we can all be better. I think that when we seek perfection as a principle, we mean that, well, we will never fully achieve it. but we will always constantly want to be improved and be better. And a lot of people said, I'm neutral. You know, we have good intent, but we're frustrated on how to proceed. So there's a lot of us on this call that are pretty frustrated. And I get that. I get how this can be hard. And some are concerned. We talk a good game, but we're not doing much with this stuff. We need leaders engaged in this work. And this is going to be an important part. Let's be respectful and get that last poll in if we could, Mary, and then I'll be polite and summarize this piece. And I know that we have lots going on. All right, what best describes your work situation? Or the first one, leaders who have a different agenda and don't support this new distraction, meaning that Shingo is a new distraction. So leaders who have a different agenda, but they don't support this new distraction, or leaders who know this is cool, but they don't want to jeopardize their retirement. So they're not going to, you know, they'll let you play in it as a lean leader, but they're not going to go much farther. Or you have leaders who are open, but they do need encouragement to hear what you have to share and when this will be done. Or do you have leaders who are ready for change and they've asked you to attend conferences like this in order to make it happen? Or are you that senior leader here today and you're ready to make this happen? So where do you feel like your leaders are in your situation when it comes to whether they're willing to engage or not? What do we have for results, Mary? Okay, so a lot right in the middle on this one. So I'll just read them again. About 34% feeling very heavy. 34% said leaders who are open to this, but they need encouragement to hear what you have to share when this is done. But 33% saying leaders are also asking you to make some changes and to help you make this happen. And then 20%, a quarter of the people on this call today are the senior leader and you're ready to make this happen. Now, again, recognizing that there are a few people that think this is kind of cool, and there are a few people who say, hey, we have some leaders who think that they have a different agenda and they don't think this is going to be helpful. Let me just conclude by saying this. I have worked with so many organizations now. We've had such unique opportunities to be able to work with some great organizations around the globe. We continue to be able to do some things that confirm for me this works and it works really well. But we as leaders have to ask better questions. We have to ask better questions, meaning we need to be better coaches. And as we lead with better questions, we will help achieve better outcomes. And it begins with our why. It begins with why and our reason for being and why we do this. I am so grateful to be a participant today, to be able to engage with you today. And I'm so grateful that we get to hear from leaders who are doing this and that are doing this with a lot of courage, because it does take some courage, but the journey and the effort is worth it. And I hope that you can convince those leaders who are still struggling with that. I hope you can help the leaders who have started this journey, but it got too complicated and it got really focused on the tools and the sophistication and sophistication of the systems got complicated. And I encourage all of us to be able to take the time we need to be able to get on this journey, not because we're perfect, but because the journey is worth it. I will conclude by saying I was walking through a medical device manufacturer the other day with a director who'd been there for 24 years. And we walked through the Gemba, as Ken said, you know, we lament the fact that we can't be out there in the Gemba right now live, because it is hard, but the virtual it works for what it can do today. But this director came back in the room. He had 2,000 people on that floor that he was responsible for. And this was in Latin America. And with tears nearly in his eyes, he said, I just learned more in that Gemba walk, asking the questions, than I've learned in any of my tier meetings for the last 6 months. And he realized that being out there asking the questions and knowing how to ask those questions helps him to be able to know what to do more thoughtfully, more meaningfully in the future. My friends, I love the Shingo. I am so grateful to be with you today, and I'm grateful for this conference. Mary, thank you for choosing this theme, and thank you for allowing me to be a part of it.